Back to the football. Barcelona and Juventus meet this weekend in the Champions League final. They are two of Europe's most successful clubs. But how do they compare? I'm pleased to say that former Barcelona marketing executive Esteve Calzada is here in the studio with us. He's been looking at both sides. Esteve, wonderful to see you today. The first thing to talk about, I suppose, is finances. Both of these teams, Juventus and Barcelona, giants of world football. But how do they compare?
Yeah, I would say that Juventus used to be giant and is on his way back up, but in terms of comparison of revenues, obviously they are still playing different leagues. Barcelona was last season on close to 500 million euros in revenues, and exactly 485 million euros, and Juventus was on 279 million euros. So the difference is still huge. But what we can see is that in the last 3-4 years, Barcelona income has somehow flattened for obvious reasons because they were already at a high, whereas Juventus, behind a plan, a very concrete strategic plan, have managed to almost double the revenue. So the difference is still huge, but I would say Juventus is catching up.
We all know about Barcelona's moves in the transfer market, the big money that they spend. We know that yourself, you look after players as well as an agent. But Luis Suarez was the big marquee transfer signing for them last year. How does it compare with Juventus's spending in recent seasons?
I think that we can have a proper comparison here because it's true that last season was very extraordinary for FC Barcelona because they were ahead of a potential ban by FIFA. So this together with the fact that they were doing a new team to come back and win. So last season Barcelona spent 157 million euros. But if we take that season aside, Juventus had a plan, and back in 11-12 season they invested 86 million euros. And in total, in the last 4 years, they've invested more than 200 million euros. So that's still a little bit less than Barcelona, especially because of the last year's investment. But in the previous 3 years, actually, Juventus spent more than FC Barcelona.
Oh, that's very interesting. What about the following of these big clubs? Because with social media, particularly these days, support of clubs is a little bit easier to gauge then, isn't it? So what about their popularity?
Yeah, here is obviously when we see the huge difference between both sides. Actually, Barcelona, obviously, we can talk about a truly global brand, whereas Juventus, unfortunately, has been somehow out of the international picture on the basis of lack of success on the pitch, plus also the lack of popularity of the Serie A where they are playing, despite the fact that they won the last 4 tournaments. So here we're talking about an important difference in which we see Barcelona at around 125 million followers globally in the most popular social networks, where Juventus is around 22 million. So the difference is huge here, and I would say that the number one objective or challenge for Juventus is to go and become global again, as they used to be like 10-15 years ago.
How important is that social media now to football clubs and their operating profits?
That's extremely important, not only for the clubs, but for the players themselves. For the clubs, it allows the possibility to communicate with the fans directly and globally in a very easy manner, and it's also a way to rank the different clubs when it comes to sit down with a potential sponsor. So with these numbers, you show your growth. For instance, if I were from the Juventus side, even if the number is not that huge, I would have a growth story. Juventus has grown its social media base 20% only in the last 6 months. So it's always very important and a nice story to go and tell to potential partners.
Yeah, amazing to see how far behind Barcelona they are with the social media. But you mentioned the players particularly. I think we can look at the 5 most popular players on social media for each team. And again, just looking at that, it's quite incredible findings, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say it goes along with the name that we're talking about, right? And you just talk about 1-0 difference from one to the other. So you're talking the likes of Messi, Neymar, Piqué, Iniesta, world champions, Luis Suarez also. Whereas in Juventus, the most popular players are Morata and Pirlo. Big names in Italy, but still not that well known globally.
Wow, 92 million, Messi and Neymar as far as followers, etc. That's really quite incredible. We all know the Premier League is the richest league in the world. We've been showing some of those stats today. What can La Liga and Serie A do to improve their own revenues and try and catch up with the English Premier League?
I would say they both have a serious transformation challenge ahead. For La Liga, I would say the number one challenge is the move from individual TV rights sales into centralized TV rights sales in a way that more money will flow into the smaller teams, and that will allow those smaller teams to come up with better players and be able to compete with the likes of Barcelona and Real Madrid, right? When we talk about Serie A, I think here is more difficult, and probably what the clubs need to do is similar to what Juventus has done, and the number one investment, I would say, needs to go to stadium. Juventus has come up with a new stadium, and just with that they tripled the revenues in the last 4 years since they moved into Juventus Stadium, and I would say that's what the other team should do to try to start catching up and get the Serie A back to the top again.
Esteve, thank you very much for joining us today. We've really enjoyed your company. Will this man be at Tottenham? Come the start of next season, we hear from his teammate Jan Vertonghen on Hugo Lloris's future. That's next.